The night I lost hope was the same night someone else found a reason to live again. I used to believe that if I worked hard enough, loved deeply enough, and stayed kind no matter what life threw at me, everything would eventually fall into place. At 29, I knew better. Hope didn't disappear all at once. It faded quietly, one unpaid bill, one rejected job application, one sleepless night at a time until it became something you barely remembered having. That Tuesday night, the temperature had dropped to 38 degrees, and the old silver Toyota Camry that had become my daughter's bedroom and mine creaked every time the cold wind pushed against its worn-out frame. I had parked beneath a broken parking lot light behind a 24-hour grocery store outside downtown Chicago because it felt safer than the highway rest stop where we'd spent the previous 2 nights. Safer didn't mean comfortable. My driver's seat barely reclined, and the heater had stopped working almost 3 weeks earlier. I wrapped my thin jacket tighter around myself, pretending it was enough, pretending Lily couldn't see me shivering. She was only 5, but children notice everything. Especially when their mothers tried to hide the truth. I kept my eyes closed, hoping she had finally drifted off, until I felt something impossibly gentle settle across my shoulders. I opened them just enough to see my little girl stretching as far as she could from the back seat, carefully placing her tiny pink hoodie over me. It was 2 sizes too small even for her now, faded from too many washes, but she smiled anyway. "Mommy," she whispered, "you're colder than me." My throat tightened so hard I couldn't answer. I only reached back and squeezed her little hand. She smiled like she just solved the biggest problem in the world before curling beneath the old blanket we'd rescued from a donation bin weeks earlier. I waited until her breathing slowed before allowing the tears to come. Quiet tears. Mothers become experts at crying without making a sound. Across the parking lot, headlights rolled slowly between empty rows of cars before stopping several spaces away. I barely noticed at first. Expensive SUVs never paid attention to old sedans like mine. People with money had perfected the art of looking past people like us. I expected the vehicle to leave after a moment, but instead its engine fell silent. The driver's door opened. A tall man stepped out wearing a charcoal overcoat that moved gently in the winter wind. Even from this distance, something about him felt different. Not louder. Not arrogant. Just still. He didn't approach immediately. He simply stood beside the black SUV, looking toward my car with an expression I couldn't understand beneath the glow of the parking lot lights. Then his eyes settled on Lily's tiny hoodie draped across my shoulders. For a long moment, he never looked away. And for reasons I couldn't explain, either did I. I should have started the engine and driven away. Every instinct I had built from months of surviving whispered that strangers with expensive cars never brought good news to women sleeping in old sedans. Instead, I sat perfectly still, my fingers wrapped around Lily's tiny hoodie while pretending I was simply waiting for my daughter to wake up. The man remained where he was for another minute before slowly walking toward a small coffee stand attached to the grocery store entrance. The place never truly closed. Truck drivers, nurses finishing late shifts, and exhausted parents drifted through its automatic doors all night long. He disappeared inside without looking at me again. I let out a breath I had not realized I was holding. Maybe I had imagined the whole thing. Maybe he had only been buying coffee. 5 minutes later, Lily stirred behind me, rubbing her sleepy blue eyes. "Is it morning?" she whispered. I smiled even though my heart still felt heavy. "Not yet, sweetheart. Go back to sleep." She nodded but looked past my shoulder toward the parking lot. "That man keeps looking at us." Children notice things adults often ignored. I turned carefully. He had returned, carrying 2 paper coffee cups and a small white bakery bag. He stopped several feet from my window, far enough that I did not feel cornered. Then he gently lowered the bag onto the empty parking space beside my car before taking 2 slow steps backward. "You do not have to be afraid," he said calmly. His voice was deep but surprisingly gentle, carrying none of the pity I had grown to hate. "There is hot chocolate in the smaller cup. I thought your daughter might like it." I stared at him without moving. He did not ask me to roll down the window, He did not knock on the glass. He simply waited. Lily leaned forward between the seats. "Mommy," she whispered, her eyes fixed on the paper bag. I swallowed hard. "We cannot accept things from strangers." The man nodded once, almost as if he had expected that answer. "Then throw it away after I leave if that makes you feel safer." He offered the faintest smile. "But it is going to be another cold night." There was something unusual about him. Most people either ignored us completely or tried too hard to prove they were good people. He did neither. His eyes drifted toward Lily for only a second before returning to me, careful not to make my daughter uncomfortable. "My name is Damien," he said quietly. "That is all you need to know tonight." Then he turned around and walked back toward the black SUV without asking for my name, without expecting gratitude, without waiting for permission to help. The engine started moments later, but instead of driving away immediately, the vehicle remained parked with its headlights off. As if he wanted to make sure we were safe before leaving. I waited another full minute before opening my door. The coffee was still steaming in the freezing air. The bakery bag held 2 warm breakfast sandwiches, 2 apples, and a small carton of milk with a handwritten note folded neatly beside it. It contained only 6 words. "Every family deserves one warm meal." Morning arrived with pale gray clouds stretching across the Chicago skyline, and for the first time in weeks, Lily smiled before I had to pretend everything was going to be all right. She held the empty hot chocolate cup in both hands as though it were something precious instead of disposable. "Do you think Mr. Damien has a little girl too?" she asked while watching people hurry into the grocery store with fresh coffee and clean clothes. I looked down at the handwritten note one more time before folding it carefully into my wallet beside the only family photograph I still owned. "I do not know," I answered honestly. "Sometimes kind people are simply kind." She accepted my answer with the quiet wisdom only children seem to possess. By 8 o'clock I had already changed into the only blouse that was still wrinkle-free enough for another interview. I brushed my hair using the rearview mirror, tucked Lily's curls beneath her little knit hat, and drove across town toward another accounting office that had promised to call after reviewing my application. They smiled politely, thanked me for coming, and told me they had chosen another candidate with more recent experience. It was the 6th rejection in 3 weeks. I thanked them anyway because dignity was free, and I refused to let poverty take that from me too. By late afternoon my gas gauge hovered just above empty. I calculated every mile in my head, deciding which parking lot would be safest for another night if I could not find enough money for fuel. Lily sat quietly in the back seat coloring on the back of an old restaurant menu. "Look, Mommy," she said proudly. "I drew our future house." I glanced at the picture while waiting at a red light. It had a blue front door, flower boxes beneath every window, and smoke rising from a chimney. 3 stick figures stood outside holding hands beneath an enormous yellow sun. There was no expensive car. No mansion. No swimming pool. Just a tiny home where everyone smiled. "It is beautiful," I whispered, fighting the familiar ache in my chest. We stopped at a small public park so Lily could stretch her legs before sunset. While she laughed on the swings, I sat on a nearby bench updating my resume for what felt like the 100th time. That was when a black luxury sedan rolled quietly into the parking lot. My stomach tightened immediately. 2 men stepped out wearing dark suits, but instead of approaching with confidence, they kept a respectful distance. One of them walked over slowly with his hands visible. "Miss Carter?" he asked politely. Hearing my last name from a complete stranger made every protective instinct awaken at once. I stood immediately, placing myself between the man and Lily. "Who are you?" He offered a simple business card without taking another step. "My employer asked me to deliver a message. Nothing more." I looked down at the card. There was no company logo. Only a name. Damien Blackwood. Beneath it, one handwritten sentence. "No money. No obligations. Just one opportunity if you choose to accept it." My heartbeat quickened as the man reached into his coat, removed a sealed envelope, and carefully placed it on the empty bench before walking away without another word. I waited until their car disappeared beyond the park entrance before touching the envelope, unsure whether opening it would be the smartest decision I had made in months or the biggest mistake of my life. My hands trembled as I turned the envelope over. There was no company logo, no legal language, no contract waiting to trap me. Just my name written neatly across the front in dark blue ink. I glanced toward Lily. She was chasing a squirrel across the playground with the carefree determination only children possessed, laughing as though we were spending the afternoon at a park because we wanted to instead of because we had nowhere else to go. I carefully broke the seal. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a plain business card. The letter was surprisingly short. Miss Carter, if you are reading this, it means you accepted the envelope, not my help. There is a difference, and I respect that. Tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, an accounting firm on West Monroe Street will conduct interviews for a temporary financial analyst position. Your resume has already been delivered. They know nothing about me and owe me nothing. If they hire you, it will be because of your qualifications. If they do not, then you lose nothing except 1 hour. The choice is entirely yours. There was no signature except one simple name. Damien. I read the letter twice before folding it again. It did not offer money. It did not promise miracles. It simply opened a door I had not even known existed. Mommy? Lily ran back toward me, cheeks pink from the cool breeze. Can we come back here someday when everything gets better? I smiled and brushed a strand of hair away from her face. Yes, I whispered. I think we will. That evening we returned to the same grocery store parking lot. I almost chose a different place, worried that accepting even this small opportunity somehow meant giving away my independence, but habit won. The silver Camry settled into the familiar corner beneath the broken light. I spent nearly 2 hours reviewing accounting regulations from old notes, stored on my laptop before the battery finally died. Lily had already fallen asleep clutching the stuffed rabbit someone had donated months earlier. Around 10:30, another vehicle quietly entered the lot. This time it was not the black sport utility vehicle. It was an older delivery van with the logo of a local hotel on the side. A middle-aged woman stepped out wearing a navy housekeeping uniform. She smiled warmly through my cracked window and held up a folded piece of paper. Are you Emily? She asked softly. I hesitated before lowering the window a few inches. Yes. She handed me the note. Someone prepaid a room for 1 night under your name. If you choose not to use it, the reservation expires tomorrow afternoon. No payment information is required. No identification beyond your driver's license. My heart sank. I already knew who had arranged it. Before I could respond, she added something unexpected. I have worked there for 18 years. Whoever paid asked us to treat you exactly like every other guest. Nothing more. She returned to the van without waiting for an answer. I looked down at the reservation slip in my hands, then toward Lily sleeping beneath her warm blanket. 1 warm bed. 1 hot shower. 1 uninterrupted night of sleep before the most important interview of my life. I closed my eyes, took a slow breath, and realized accepting kindness could sometimes require more courage than surviving without it. I accepted the room, but I refused to let myself believe it changed anything. 1 clean night could not erase months of uncertainty. It could not guarantee a job or refill an empty gas tank or promise that Lily and I would never sleep in our car again. Still, when warm water washed away the exhaustion clinging to my skin, I realized I had almost forgotten what it felt like to stop surviving long enough to breathe. Lily laughed as she jumped onto the hotel bed, wrapping herself in the thick white comforter like it was the softest cloud she had ever touched. Mommy, she whispered with sleepy eyes, does this mean we are rich tonight? I laughed for the first time in longer than I could remember. No, sweetheart. It just means someone wanted us to rest. She nodded as if that answer made perfect sense before falling asleep within minutes, hugging her little stuffed rabbit beneath a mountain of pillows. I stayed awake much longer, studying financial reports on the hotel desk until midnight. Every interview question I could remember played through my mind again and again. By 6:30 the next morning I was dressed in my navy blazer, the same one I had worn to every interview despite the sleeves beginning to fray. I carefully braided Lily's hair before dropping her at a neighborhood day care that accepted hourly payments. It cost nearly the last dollars in my wallet, but I refused to let her wait in the car during something this important. The accounting firm occupied the 12th floor of a modern glass building overlooking the Chicago River. Everything smelled of polished wood and fresh coffee. I expected another polite rejection before I even stepped through the reception area. Instead, the receptionist smiled warmly. "Good morning, Miss Carter. They are expecting you." Those 4 words alone felt unfamiliar. Someone was expecting me. The interview lasted nearly 90 minutes. They asked about corporate budgeting, tax compliance, nonprofit accounting, and financial forecasting. Numbers had always made sense to me even when life did not. By the time I walked out, I felt something I had almost forgotten. Confidence. Whether they hired me or not, I had answered every question honestly and without pretending to be someone else. I picked Lily up just after noon. She climbed into my arms holding a crayon drawing covered in bright colors. "Look," she said proudly. "It is you getting a job." I kissed the top of her head. "I hope you are a better fortune." "Tell her then, Mommy." We had barely reached the parking garage when my phone rang. The unfamiliar number almost sent me to voicemail, but something told me to answer. "Miss Carter?" a cheerful voice said. "This is Rebecca from Hamilton Financial Group. We would like to offer you the temporary analyst position if you are still interested." I stopped walking. The concrete floor beneath my feet suddenly felt unsteady. "Are you serious?" I asked before I could stop myself. Rebecca laughed softly. "Very serious. We were impressed with your experience and professionalism. We hope you can start Monday." After the call ended, I sat inside my car without turning the key. Lily reached over from the back seat and squeezed my hand. "Mommy?" she asked. Tears blurred my vision as I smiled at her. "We got the job." She threw both arms into the air with a joyful squeal that echoed through the empty garage. As I hugged my daughter, I noticed a familiar black sport utility vehicle parked quietly across the street. It remained there only a few seconds before disappearing into afternoon traffic, and somehow I knew Damien had never intended for me to realize he had been watching from a distance just long enough to see us smile. Monday morning felt unreal. Instead of waking to stiff muscles inside a cold car, Lily and I left the hotel before sunrise and returned the room key with grateful smiles. I promised myself it would be the last time we accepted help we could not repay. My first paycheck would change that. Hamilton Financial Group welcomed me with fresh coffee, orientation paperwork, and something I had not experienced in nearly a year. A desk with my name on it. It was temporary, only a 3-month contract, but when I ran my fingertips across the small engraved nameplate, it felt permanent enough for my heart. The office overlooked the Chicago River, where sunlight danced across the water like thousands of tiny mirrors. I spent the morning reviewing financial statements and organizing budget reports, slipping back into a career that had once seemed lost forever. Numbers still behaved logically. They followed rules. They balanced. Life had never offered the same courtesy. During lunch I checked my phone and found 3 missed calls from an unfamiliar number. A voicemail followed. The voice belonged to a man I had hoped never to hear again. Ryan. Lily's father. I stared at the screen without pressing play. He had disappeared almost 2 years earlier, leaving unpaid promises behind along with every responsibility that came with being a parent. He never called on birthdays. Never asked whether Lily needed shoes or medicine. Silence had been his only contribution to our lives. Yet somehow hearing his name again made every peaceful moment of the past few days feel fragile. That evening I picked Lily up from daycare. She ran into my arms carrying another drawing. This one showed 3 birds sitting together on the same branch. "Families stay together," she explained proudly. "Even when it rains." I kissed her forehead and smiled, wishing life were always as simple as children's drawings. We drove toward the small extended stay motel I had finally been able to reserve for 1 week using my signing bonus from work. It was not much, just one room with a tiny kitchenette, but it had a real bed, running water, and a lock that belonged to us. As I unloaded our 2 duffel bags, the motel manager approached carrying a small package. "This was left for you earlier," she said. "The gentleman asked that I wait until after you checked in." My stomach tightened immediately. There was no return address. Inside the plain brown box sat a children's winter coat, a pair of pink snow boots exactly Lily's size, and a simple white envelope. I opened it slowly. There was only one sentence inside. "Winter arrives early in Chicago. Children should never have cold feet." There was no signature because there did not need to be one. I looked out toward the parking lot, half expecting to see the familiar black sport utility vehicle, but only ordinary cars filled the spaces beneath the fading evening sky. "Mommy," Lily whispered as she hugged the new coat against her chest. "How does he always know what we need?" I looked at my daughter, then back toward the empty entrance, searching for an answer I did not have. Somewhere beyond what I could see, Damien Blackwood seemed to notice every small struggle before it became a crisis, and for the first time since meeting him, I began to wonder who had taught a man with so much power to care so quietly. The first week passed more quietly than I expected. Every morning I walked Lily into daycare before crossing the street to Hamilton Financial Group, and every evening she greeted me with another drawing and another story about the friends she was making. Slowly, life stopped feeling like something I had to outrun. My first paycheck arrived on Friday afternoon. I stared at the direct deposit notification for nearly a full minute before smiling. It was not a fortune, but it was earned honestly, and every dollar represented another step away from the parking lot where Lily and I had once counted quarters just to buy breakfast. That evening we celebrated with 2 cheeseburgers, 1 order of fries, and chocolate milkshakes from a small family diner a few blocks from the motel. Lily declared it the best dinner of her life, even though I knew she had eaten much fancier meals years earlier before everything fell apart. Happiness, I realized, had very little to do with price. As we stepped outside after dinner, my phone buzzed again. The same unfamiliar number. This time I answered. "Emily." Ryan's voice sounded older than I remembered, heavier somehow. "I heard you found a job." My smile disappeared instantly. "How did you get this number?" There was a short silence before he answered. "Does it matter? I want to see Lily." I leaned against the car, watching my daughter chase falling leaves across the sidewalk. "You have not asked about her in almost 2 years. People make mistakes. Children remember them." Another long silence followed. "I just want to talk." I closed my eyes for a moment. "When you are ready to become a father instead of a visitor, you can call my attorney after I hire one." I ended the call before he could answer. My hands trembled slightly as I slipped the phone back into my purse. Lily noticed immediately. "Everything okay, Mommy?" she asked. I forced a smile. "Everything is going to be okay." She accepted that answer, but children always sense more than adults believed. The next Monday morning, I found a small vase of fresh white daisies waiting on my desk at work. There was no card, only a tiny envelope tucked beneath the ribbon. Inside, a single handwritten sentence made me pause. "Congratulations on your first paycheck. I hope you are proud of yourself." I looked around the office, almost expecting someone to admit they had delivered it, but everyone remained busy with meetings and spreadsheets. No one seemed to notice my surprise. During lunch I walked to the nearest flower shop printed on the receipt attached to the vase. The elderly owner smiled warmly when I asked about the order. "Very polite gentleman," she said. "Dark hair. Blue eyes. Paid in cash." I laughed softly despite myself. "Did he leave a name?" She shook her head. "Only one request. He said the flowers should never make the recipient feel like she owes him anything." I carried the daisies back to my office more confused than ever. Damien never asked for thanks. Never appeared when gifts arrived. Never gave me an opportunity to repay him. It was as though he understood that pride was one of the few possessions poverty could not take unless someone surrendered it willingly. That evening, while driving Lily back to the motel beneath the sky painted orange by the setting sun, I caught sight of a familiar black sport utility vehicle waiting at a red light across the intersection. For the first time, instead of wondering why Damien kept finding us, I found myself wondering why a man who seemed to have everything chose to remain so completely alone. 2 weeks later, life finally began to resemble something I recognized. Hamilton Financial Group extended my contract by another 3 months, and for the first time in nearly a year I signed a lease on a modest one-bedroom apartment overlooking a quiet side street lined with maple trees. The building was old, the elevator groaned every time it moved, and the kitchen was barely large enough for 2 people to stand inside, but when the property manager handed me the keys, they felt heavier than gold. They were proof that Lily and I belonged somewhere again. Our first evening there was wonderfully ordinary. We ate boxed macaroni and cheese sitting on the living room floor because we owned no table yet. Lily insisted our folded blankets counted as furniture until we could afford real couches. Every few minutes she ran from room to room announcing which corner belonged to her stuffed rabbit, which window would hold flowers one day, and where she wanted to hang every drawing she had made during our hardest months. Watching her laugh inside walls that were finally ours filled every empty place inside my heart. The following Saturday morning someone knocked gently on the apartment door. I opened it expecting a delivery driver. Instead I found 3 movers carrying carefully wrapped furniture. "Delivery from Miss Emily Carter," the first man said politely. "There must be some mistake," I answered immediately. "I did not order anything." He handed me a clipboard. "The sender instructed us to return everything immediately if you declined." My stomach tightened as I noticed there was no company name, only another familiar envelope resting beneath the paperwork. I opened it slowly. "Miss Carter, every child deserves a place to eat breakfast before school. Every mother deserves a chair where she can drink her coffee before work. If these items make you uncomfortable, they will be taken away immediately. If they stay, consider them a housewarming gift with no expectations attached." I closed my eyes for a long moment before looking back at the movers. "Please wait." Lily appeared beside me, still wearing fuzzy socks decorated with little stars. Her eyes grew wide as she peeked around the doorway. "Mommy," she whispered, "is that a real table?" I looked at her hopeful expression, then back at the note. Pride mattered. Independence mattered. But perhaps allowing kindness into our home did not erase either one. "You may bring them inside," I said quietly. Within an hour our apartment looked transformed. A simple wooden dining table. 4 matching chairs. A comfortable gray sofa. 2 bookshelves. Nothing extravagant. Everything practical. Exactly the sort of furniture I would have chosen myself if I could have afforded it. There were no luxury brands or unnecessary displays of wealth. Whoever selected each piece had thought about how a mother and daughter actually lived. That evening Lily carefully placed 3 paper plates on the new dining table before dinner. "We have 3 seats left," she observed thoughtfully. "Maybe one day Mr. Damien can come visit." I almost laughed before realizing how natural his name had become inside our little family. At that exact moment my phone vibrated with a news alert. A local business magazine displayed the photograph of a man standing outside a downtown office tower. Dark hair. Blue eyes. Calm expression. The headline read, "Chicago business leader Damien Blackwood expands Blackwood Holdings with record-breaking investment." I stared at the article in complete disbelief. He was not simply a successful businessman as I had assumed. He owned an empire. Yet somehow, among everything demanding his attention, he had noticed a little girl sleeping in the back seat of an old silver Camry, and quietly changed 2 lives without ever asking for credit. 3 months passed faster than I ever imagined. My temporary position became permanent, our little apartment slowly filled with family photographs instead of moving boxes, and every Friday evening Lily and I celebrated another ordinary week together with homemade pizza in our tiny kitchen. Ordinary had become my favorite word. It meant safety. It meant laughter. It meant never wondering where we would sleep that night. Yet there was still one person I had never properly thanked. On the first Saturday in December, I followed an address I had quietly found through the business article. Blackwood Holdings occupied an elegant building overlooking the Chicago River, all glass and polished stone. I almost turned around twice before walking inside. The receptionist smiled warmly. "Miss Carter?" she asked before I introduced myself. "Mr. Blackwood asked that if you ever came here, you should never have to wait." A few moments later the elevator doors opened onto the top floor. Damien stood beside the windows overlooking the city, dressed in a dark navy suit, one hand wrapped around a cup of coffee. He looked exactly as I remembered from that freezing night, calm, composed, impossible to read. For several seconds neither of us spoke. Finally I broke the silence. "Why?" His expression softened just enough for me to notice. "That is a very small word for such a large question." I nodded. "Why us?" He looked out across the skyline before answering. "Because one night I saw a little girl cover her mother with the only warm thing she owned." His voice remained steady, but something deeper lived beneath every word. "I have spent years surrounded by people asking what they could take from me. Your daughter only wanted to give." I felt tears gathering before I could stop them. "You changed our lives." He shook his head gently. "No, Emily. I only opened a door. You walked through it yourself." At that moment Lily stepped out from behind my chair carrying a piece of folded construction paper she had insisted on bringing. She walked straight toward Damien without fear and handed it to him with both hands. "This is for you." He accepted it with surprising care, unfolding the picture slowly. It showed 3 people standing outside a small house with a blue front door beneath a bright yellow sun. This time the third figure was taller than the others. Above them, written in uneven 5-year-old handwriting, were the words, "Thank you for helping my mommy smile again." Damien stared at the drawing for a long moment without speaking. When he finally looked up, his blue eyes glistened in a way I had never expected from a man whose name carried so much influence. Lily tilted her head innocently. "Did I spell everything right?" He smiled, the first genuine smile I had ever seen from him. "Perfectly." As we prepared to leave, he walked us to the elevator himself. There were no photographers. No public announcement. No ceremony. Just 3 ordinary people sharing a quiet moment. Months later I learned that Damien had quietly established a foundation that helped single parents find temporary housing, childcare, and employment without publicity or recognition. He never attached his name to the program. He said the families deserve new beginnings, not reminders of their hardest days. Sometimes people ask me whether heroes really exist. I always think back to that freezing night in a grocery store parking lot. They imagine a hero changes the world with grand speeches or impossible miracles. Mine simply noticed a little girl placing her tiny hoodie over her sleeping mother. He thought he rescued a struggling family. The truth is that Lily and I rescued something far rarer. We reminded a man who could buy almost anything that the most valuable things in life can only be given away with kindness.